When Wade Braddock rode into his own yard that September morning and saw his wife standing on the porch after 3 years gone, he knew the fragile peace he'd built across this blood-stained territory was about to shatter. Vivian hadn't come home to reconcile. She'd come to take their daughter back east, away from the dust and danger, away from the hard truths Wade represented. But Eliza was 17 now, caught between her mother's polished world and the raw frontier where men like Cal Mercer proved their worth with sweat and spine. As tribal leaders faced forced removal, settlers screamed for land, and corrupt politicians played both sides for profit, Wade stood alone in the center of a gathering storm that would demand he choose between the law and what was right. And that choice would tear this territory apart. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this story travels. Hit that like button and let's ride this storm together all the way to the end. The sun hadn't cleared the eastern ridge when Wade Braddock heard the wagon rolling up his drive. He was in the barn checking a mare's swollen foreleg, his hands gentle despite their roughness, his mind already running through the day's impossible demands. The Territorial Council meeting at noon. The boundary dispute between the Johnsons and the new homesteaders. The quiet tension building around the tribal camps north of town, where federal promises had turned to ash and angry whispers grew louder each week. The wagon wheels stopped. Wade straightened slowly, his back protesting the early hour. 43 years old, and he felt every damn one of them lately. He walked to the barn door and stopped cold. The woman stepping down from the wagon wore a traveling suit that had never seen a day's honest work, deep green with black trim, her hair pinned in a style that belonged to Philadelphia drawing rooms, not Wyoming dust. She moved with the careful precision of someone who'd forgotten how to walk on dirt, lifting her hem just enough to show polished boots that cost more than most men earned in a month. Vivian. Wade's jaw tightened. 3 years. 3 years of silence, of lawyers' letters and cold refusals, of their daughter asking questions he couldn't answer without lying or breaking her heart. And now she was here, standing in his yard like she owned it, her chin raised in that way that meant she'd already decided she was right about everything. He stepped out of the barn. Vivian. She turned. Her face was older, lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before, but the set of her mouth was exactly the same. Determined, unyielding, ready for war. Wade? Her voice was clipped, Eastern, all the frontier worn out of it. I've come for Eliza. Not hello. Not how have you been. Straight to the kill. She's not property, Wade said, his voice level. You can't just come for her. She's my daughter. She's our daughter, and she's 17, old enough to have her own thoughts on the matter. Vivian's eyes flashed. Old enough to be ruined by this place if I don't intervene. I've secured her a position at Miss Morrison's Academy in Boston. She'll have proper education, proper society, proper opportunities. Proper chains, Wade interrupted. That's what you're offering, a gilded cage where she can learn to be useless and decorative. Better than learning to be coarse and common out here among... Vivian caught herself, but not fast enough. Wade saw exactly where that sentence was headed. Among what? He asked quietly. Cowboys, homesteaders, Indians? Say it, Vivian. Say what you really think. She looked away. I think she deserves better than this. She deserves honesty, Wade said, which is something you stopped giving her the day you left. The sound of footsteps on the porch made them both turn. Eliza stood there in a simple cotton dress, her dark hair braided loosely, her face caught between hope and dread. She was beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with fancy clothes or careful styling. She had her mother's fine features but her father's steady gaze, and right now that gaze was fixed on Vivian with an expression Wade couldn't quite read. Mother, Eliza said. Her voice shook slightly. You're here. Vivian's face transformed, softening into something that almost looked like genuine emotion. Darling, yes, I'm here. She moved toward the porch, her arms opening. I've come to take you home. Eliza didn't move. This is home. No, darling, Boston is home. Or it will be, once you see it. I have everything arranged. You should have written, Eliza said. You should have asked. I did write. Your father kept my letters from you. That's a lie, Wade said sharply. Every letter you sent reached her, all 6 of them in 3 years. And she answered every one. Vivian's mouth thinned. Then you interfered with my correspondence. Stop it, Eliza said. Both parents turned to her in surprise. She was gripping the porch railing, her knuckles white. Just stop. I don't want to be the thing you fight over. I don't want to be anyone's property or project or... Her voice cracked. I'm not a child anymore. Which is precisely why you need guidance, Vivian said. Eliza, sweetheart, you can't possibly understand what I'm offering you. Education, culture, introductions to families who matter. Families who matter to you, Eliza said. What about what matters to me? You don't know what matters yet, Vivian snapped. You're 17. You've never seen anything but this crude frontier settlement. How can you know what you want when you don't know what exists beyond these dusty hills? Wade watched his daughter's face close off, watched her spine straighten in exactly the way his did when someone pushed too hard. It was like seeing himself in a mirror, and it filled him with equal parts pride and pain. I know I don't want to be told I'm stupid for loving the place I was born, Eliza said quietly. I know I don't want to be told the people I care about don't matter because they work with their hands instead of shuffling papers in some office. She looked at Wade. I know my father never once lied to me about why you left, even when the truth made him look bad. He said you wanted a different life. He said you weren't wrong to want it. He just said it wasn't his life, and it wasn't mine either, unless I chose it. Vivian's face went pale. Eliza, you should have asked, Eliza repeated. Then she turned and went back into the house, the screen door shutting with a soft click that sounded loud as a gunshot in the sudden silence. Vivian stood there, her arms still half raised, her carefully composed expression crumbling. For just a moment, Wade saw the woman he'd married 20 years ago, proud, fierce, and utterly lost when things didn't go according to her plans. She needs time, Wade said, though it cost him to offer even that much compassion. You can stay in town. The Morrison place takes boarders. I know where I can stay, Vivian said. Her mask was back up, perfect and cold. And I'm not giving up, Wade. She's being wasted here. She's too intelligent, too refined for this rough country. She's exactly what this country needs, Wade interrupted. Smart, tough, honest. The kind of person who can build something real instead of just managing appearance. How noble, Vivian said acidly. Tell me. Does your noble frontier philosophy extend to that ranch hand I saw watching the house when I arrived? The one who looked at my daughter like she was something he had a right to? Wade's expression didn't change. Cal Mercer looks at everyone straight. It's called respect, not possession, though I wouldn't expect you to know the difference. Vivian's hand moved as if to slap him, then stopped. They stood there 3 feet apart, years of anger and hurt crackling between them like heat lightning. I'm staying, Vivian said finally, and I'm fighting for her future, whether you approve or not. Never tried to stop you from fighting, Wade said. Just make sure you're fighting for her, not against me, because she's smart enough to tell the difference. He turned and walked back to the barn, his shoulders tight with tension he wouldn't show. Behind him, he heard Vivian's footsteps crunching on the gravel, then the wagon creaking as she climbed back up. The driver called to the horses, and the wheels began to roll. Wade stood in the barn's shadow and let out a long breath. The mare nickered softly behind him, and he returned to her stall, running his hand down her leg with practiced care. The swelling was going down. Small mercy. He'd take what he could get today. The sound of another horse approaching made him look up. Cal Mercer rode into the yard, sitting easy in the saddle despite his youth. 22, tall and whipcord lean, with intelligent eyes and a habit of thinking before he spoke that Wade valued more than he'd ever said aloud. Cal had been working the Braddock ranch for 2 years now, and in that time he'd proven himself smarter and more capable than men twice his age. Morning, Mr. Braddock, Cal said, swinging down. Saw the wagon heading out. Everything all right? Wade studied him. Cal's expression was neutral, but there was something in his voice, concern that went beyond simple employee courtesy. So Vivian had been right about the watching, at least. That complicated things. My wife's back, Wade said bluntly. Come to take Eliza to Boston. Cal's jaw tightened, just barely. Miss Eliza going? Don't know yet, Wade said. Eliza's got her own mind on the matter, which is how it should be. Yes, sir. Cal hesitated, then spoke carefully. If there's anything I can do, you can do your job, Wade said, not unkindly. Keep the south fence line clear. Check the water rights marker by Willow Creek. I heard Jameson's been moving it again. And stay clear of family business that's not yours to carry. Cal's face went still. Understood. He started to turn away, and Wade surprised himself by speaking again. Cal. The young man stopped, looking back. You're a good hand, Wade said. Best I've had in years. I value your work, and I respect how you conduct yourself. He paused. But my daughter's life is complicated right now, and I need you to be smart about how you navigate that. Cal met his eyes directly. I've never been anything but respectful to Miss Eliza, sir. I know, but respect doesn't always look like respect to people who are looking for reasons to judge. Wade gestured toward town, where Vivian's wagon was disappearing into the distance. Her mother's going to be watching everything, everyone, and she's already got opinions about ranch hands and their place in the world. Understanding flickered across Cal's face. You're saying I'm a problem. I'm saying you could be made into one, Wade corrected, whether you deserve it or not. So be smart, be careful. And for God's sake, don't give anyone ammunition. Cal nodded slowly. What if Miss Eliza wants something different than what her mother's planning? Then she'll have to fight for it herself, Wade said. I can't fight her battles for her. Neither can you. All we can do is make sure she knows she's got solid ground to stand on when she makes her choice. Yes, sir. Cal rode off toward the south pasture, his back straight, and Wade watched him go with a feeling of unease he couldn't quite name. The boy had honor. That was the problem. Honor made men do stupid things when they cared about people who were out of their reach. The sound of the screen door opening made Wade turn. Eliza stood on the porch again, her arms wrapped around herself despite the warming day. Is she gone? She asked. Into town. Wade walked toward the house. You all right? Eliza shrugged. I don't know. I always thought when I saw her again, I'd know what to say, but I just felt... She trailed off, looking out at the hills. Angry and sad, and I don't even know which one is fair. Wade climbed the porch steps and leaned against the railing beside her. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the morning light strengthen across the valley. Your mother's not wrong about some things, Wade said carefully. There is a bigger world out there. More opportunities than you'll find in this territory. She's right that you're smart enough to make something of yourself back east if you chose to. Eliza looked at him sharply. You want me to go? Hell no, Wade said. But I want you to choose your life, not have it chosen for you. Not by her, not by me, not by anyone. What if I don't know what I want? Then you figure it out. Take your time. You're 17, not 70. You don't have to decide your whole life today. Eliza was quiet for a long moment. Then, she said you kept her letters from me. She was lying. I know, but why would she lie about something I could so easily check? Wade smiled grimly. Because she's scared. When your mother's scared, she attacks. Always has. It's not meanness, it's just her way of fighting back against things she can't control. Like me growing up? Like you growing up into someone who thinks for herself. Wade glanced at his daughter. That scares her because it means she can't protect you the way she used to. Can't make all the hard choices for you. Did you scare her too? The question was so direct it caught Wade off guard. He considered lying, then decided against it. Eliza deserved better. Yeah, he said. I did. I still do. Because I won't pretend the world is safe when it's not. Won't tell her pretty lies to make her feel better. Your mother wanted comfort, and I gave her truth. Eventually that became something she couldn't forgive. Eliza nodded slowly, processing that. Cal Mercer's not from a good family, is he? The change of subject was jarring, but Wade rolled with it. Depends on what you mean by good. His father was a drunk who beat his mother. Cal left home at 16 and made his own way. I'd say that shows more character than most good families ever produce. Mother looked at him like he was dirt. Your mother looks at most people that way, Wade said. Doesn't make her right. Do you think I'm too young to know what I want? I think you're young enough that what you want might change. That's not the same thing. Wade straightened, but I also think you're old enough to know when someone's trying to run your life for you, and old enough to push back when they do. Eliza smiled slightly. Like I just did with her? Exactly like that. I was proud of you, by the way. Took spine to stand up to her like you did. The smile faded. She's going to keep trying, isn't she? Every day until you either give in or she gives up, Wade confirmed. Your mother doesn't do anything halfway. What should I do? Figure out what you actually want, Wade said. Not what makes her happy, not what makes me happy, not what some boy wants or what society expects. What you want. Then fight for it. He pushed off the railing and headed for the house. I've got the council meeting at noon. You need anything from town? No, Eliza said. Then, Father? He turned back. Thank you, she said quietly, for not taking sides. Haven't not taken your side, Wade corrected. Just want to make sure it's actually yours. The Territorial Council met in the back room of Morrison's General Store, a space that smelled of coffee, tobacco, and the accumulated sweat of too many men arguing in too small a space. Wade arrived exactly at noon and found the usual collection of characters already assembled. Bill Jameson, the biggest homesteader, sat near the window with his arms crossed and his face red with perpetual anger. The Morrison brothers, Joseph and Samuel, flanked the table where they sold their overpriced goods to people who had no choice but to buy. Sheriff Tom Ridley leaned against the wall, his badge catching the light, his expression carefully neutral in the way of men who'd learned to survive by never fully committing to any side. And in the best chair, the one closest to the stove despite the summer heat, sat Cornelius Vandermeer. Wade hated Cornelius Vandermeer with a purity of feeling he usually reserved for things like drought and disease. The man had arrived in the territory 2 years ago with Eastern money, Eastern manners, and Eastern arrogance that somehow made everything worse. He'd bought up land through intermediaries, set up dummy companies, and maneuvered himself onto the council through a combination of bribery and blackmail so subtle that most people never realized they'd been manipulated until it was too late. He was in his 50s, soft around the middle from good living, with silver hair and a smile that never reached his eyes. He dressed like he was heading to a Newport garden party instead of a dusty frontier meeting, and he treated everyone around him like amusing children who needed his guidance. Wade wanted to punch him every time they were in the same room. Braddock, Vandermeer said warmly, as if they were old friends. Delighted you could join us. We were just discussing the tribal situation. What situation? Wade asked, taking a seat. The increasing complaints from homesteaders about livestock going missing, Jameson said. 3 cows last week, 2 horses the week before. And before you start defending them, Braddock, we all know where the stock is going. You don't know anything, Wade said flatly. You suspect, you assume, you gossip, but you don't actually know. They're starving, Samuel Morrison offered, trying for reasonableness. The government promised provisions and delivered half of what they need. Starving people steal. It's natural. What's natural is for us to protect our property, Jameson snapped. I'm not running a charity for savages who won't work honest jobs like the rest of us. Wade's jaw tightened. They're not allowed to work honest jobs, Bill. Federal law says they stay on the tribal lands, which means they can't hire out, can't sell goods, can't do anything but wait for government supplies that never come. Not my problem, Jameson said. My problem is my missing livestock. Your problem is you can't keep track of your own animals, Wade said. I've seen your operation. Half your cows wander off because you won't fix your fencing, and the other half probably died of neglect and got picked clean by coyotes. But sure, blame the nearest Indians. It's easier than admitting you're a sloppy rancher. Jameson shot to his feet, his chair scraping. You calling me incompetent? I'm saying you're not as good at your job as you think you are, Wade said calmly. Sit down, Bill. Gentlemen, Vandermeer interjected smoothly, this is exactly the kind of unproductive discord we must avoid. The question before us is simple. How do we maintain order in the territory while respecting both property rights and humanitarian concern? Wade looked at him. You planning to actually say something useful, Cornelius, or just keep using 50 words where 5 would do? Vandermeer's smile didn't waver. I'm proposing we send a formal request to the territorial governor for federal oversight of the tribal situation. Additional troops to maintain peace, proper accounting of supplies, perhaps even relocation if the situation becomes untenable. Relocation, Wade repeated. You mean removal. I mean ensuring everyone's safety, Vandermeer said. Surely you understand the delicacy of the situation. We have new families arriving weekly. They need land, water, security. The current arrangement isn't sustainable. The current arrangement is legal, Wade said. There's a treaty. Signed, sealed, as binding as any contract you've ever weaseled out of. Treaties can be renegotiated, Vandermeer said pleasantly. especially when circumstances change. Circumstances like you wanting the water rights from the northern range? Wade asked. That kind of changing circumstance? The room went quiet. Sheriff Ridley pushed off the wall slightly, his hand hovering near his belt. The Morrison brothers exchanged glances. Even Jameson looked uncomfortable. Vandermeer's smile finally disappeared. That's a serious accusation, Braddock. It's an observation, Wade said. You've been buying up land parcels all around the tribal territory for 18 months, waiting for the right moment to push them off so you can control the whole northern water supply. Don't insult my intelligence by pretending this is about humanitarian concerns or settler safety. My investments are a matter of public record, Vandermeer said coldly, as is my commitment to the territory's development. If you're suggesting I would engineer conflict for personal gain, I'm not suggesting anything, Wade interrupted. I'm stating facts. What you do with those facts is your business. But don't expect me to support removal when I know exactly why you want it. He stood. Is there any actual council business, or are we done pretending this was about anything but Cornelius trying to steal land? There's the matter of the daughter, Joseph Morrison said quietly. Wade stopped. What? The tribal chief's daughter, Morrison clarified, looking uncomfortable. The tall bear girl. She was seen in town last week talking to Charlie Winters. His father's raising hell, saying she's too friendly, causing trouble. She was buying thread, Wade said. I was there. She spoke to Charlie for maybe 30 seconds about the weather. If that's too friendly for Henry Winters, he can keep his idiot son home. The point is there's tension, Vandermeer said. Young men from town, young women from the camps, proximity leading to impropriety. There's no impropriety, Wade snapped. There's people living next to each other trying to be civil. If you'd rather have them at each other's throats, just say so. No one wants violence, Sheriff Ridley spoke up for the first time. But Vandermeer's got a point about tension. People are nervous, on both sides. Then calm them down instead of stirring them up, Wade said. He looked around the room. I know most of you. I know you're not all corrupt or stupid. But you're letting fear make you cruel, and you're letting Cornelius use that fear for his own ends. If you can't see that, you're blind. He headed for the door. We'll be bringing this before the territorial government with or without your support, Vandermeer called after him. The situation is untenable. Change is coming whether you like it or not. Wade stopped at the door and looked back. Change is always coming, Cornelius. Question is whether it's progress or just powerful men stealing from weaker ones and calling it civilization. He walked out into the bright afternoon, his hands clenched into fists. The tribal camps lay 5 miles north of town, a collection of lodges and temporary structures that had become permanent through neglect and broken promises. Wade rode out there as the sun began its western slide, letting his horse pick the pace while his mind worked through the impossible mathematics of the situation. He found Chief Standing Bear outside his lodge, working on a bridle with the kind of patient precision that came from a lifetime of making tools last. The old man looked up as Wade dismounted, his weathered face showing no surprise. Braddock, he said in English. His accent was thick, but his grammar was perfect. He'd learned from missionaries 20 years back and had a better grasp of formal language than most settlers. You come with news or warnings? Both, Wade said. He sat on the ground across from the chief, ignoring the usual protocol. They'd moved past formality 2 years ago when Wade had stopped a lynch mob from burning the camps. The council's pushing for federal intervention, possibly removal. Standing Bear's hands didn't stop working. Because of missing livestock we did not take? Because Vandermeer wants your land and the water that runs through it. The livestock is just the excuse. And you cannot stop him. It wasn't a question. Wade appreciated that. The chief understood power dynamics better than most educated men. I can slow him down, Wade said. Make it costly, complicated. But if enough settlers scream loud enough about danger, the governor will send troops. And once troops are here, they'll do whatever they're ordered to do. Even if the orders are unjust. Especially if the orders are unjust, Wade said. Soldiers don't get paid to think about justice. They get paid to follow commands. Standing Bear nodded slowly, setting aside the bridle. My daughter, Running Deer, wishes to speak with you. Wade blinked at the change of subject. About what? She will tell you herself. She is young, but she is not foolish. Listen to her as you listen to me. A woman emerged from the lodge, 19 or 20, wearing a mix of traditional and settler clothing that marked her as someone caught between worlds. Her face was serious, her eyes sharp. "Mr. Braddock," she said. Her English was even better than her father's, nearly accent-free. "Thank you for meeting with us." "Wasn't aware we had a meeting," Wade said, but he kept his tone respectful. "My father says you are the only white man who treats us as people rather than problems to be solved," Running Deer said bluntly. "So I will speak plainly. We know we are being pushed toward violence. Men like Vandermeer want us to react, to give them excuse for removal. So we must not react." "That's smart," Wade said. "But also damn hard when you're starving and being accused of crimes you didn't commit." "Which is why we need your help," Running Deer said. "Not your protection. We are not children. But your voice, your testimony. When the territorial government comes, they will listen to a rancher like you. They will not listen to us." Wade looked between her and the chief. "You want me to vouch for you?" "We want you to tell the truth," Standing Bear corrected. "That is all. But yes, we ask you to speak it where it will be heard." "That's going to make me a lot of enemies." "You have enemies already," Running Deer said with a slight smile. "At least these will be for a good reason." Wade laughed despite himself. "Fair point." He stood. "All right, when the time comes, I'll speak. But you need to be smart too. Keep your people away from town unless it's absolutely necessary. Don't give Vandermeer any ammunition." "We will be careful," Standing Bear said, "but we will not hide. We are not criminals." "I know that. Question is whether anyone else will listen." Wade rode back toward his ranch as the light faded, his mind heavy with the weight of promises he wasn't sure he could keep. The territory was a powder keg, and all it would take was one spark, one scared settler, one hungry young man making a mistake, one ambitious politician pushing too hard, and everything would explode. He was so lost in thought he almost missed the figure standing by his front gate. Vivian. She'd changed out of her traveling clothes into something simpler, though still far too fine for ranch work. Her hair was down, catching the last light, and for a moment Wade was transported back 20 years to a woman who'd looked at him like he was worth something. "We need to talk," she said. Wade dismounted, leading his horse past her toward the barn. "About what?" "About Eliza. About us. About what happens next." "There is no us," Wade said, not looking back. "Hasn't been for 3 years." "There's a daughter," Vivian said, following him. "That makes us connected whether you like it or not." Wade unsaddled his horse, working with practiced efficiency. Vivian stood in the barn entrance, backlit by the dying sun, and for a long moment neither of them spoke. "I didn't come here to fight," she said finally. "Then why did you come?" "Because she's my daughter, and I've been a coward about it for too long." Vivian's voice was rough, lacking its usual polish. "I left because I couldn't stand this place anymore. The dust, the violence, the constant fear. But I also left because I was afraid of what staying was turning me into." Wade looked up. "What does that mean?" "It means I watched you make hard choices every day, watched you carry impossible burdens without complaint, and I hated you for it," Vivian said, "because it made me feel weak, made me feel like I wasn't strong enough for this life, for you, for any of it. So I left, and I told myself it was about wanting better for Eliza, but really," she trailed off. "Really what?" "Really, I just wanted to stop feeling like I wasn't enough." The admission hung in the air between them. Wade set down his saddle and faced her properly. "You were always enough," he said quietly. "Just not for this life. There's a difference." "Is there?" Vivian's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Or did I just give up too easily?" "Does it matter now?" "It matters to our daughter. It matters what she sees when she looks at us. What she learns about marriage, about commitment, about—" Vivian stopped, pressing her hand to her mouth. "I don't want her to run away from hard things the way I did." Wade walked toward her slowly. "Then don't ask her to choose between us. Don't make her prove loyalty by rejecting one parent for the other. Let her love both of us, even if we can't stand each other." "I can stand you," Vivian said. "That's the problem. I look at you and I still see the man I married, still see everything I couldn't be for him, and it makes me so angry I can't breathe sometimes." "Then go back east," Wade said, not unkindly. Take your anger and your guilt and your regrets and make a life that doesn't require you to be something you're not. But leave Eliza out of it. Let her make her own choice about who she wants to be. Vivian looked at him for a long moment. Then she turned and walked back toward town, her shoulders straight despite everything. Wade watched her go and felt something crack inside his chest. Not quite grief, not quite relief, just the dull ache of old wounds that had never properly healed. Inside the house, lamplight glowed in Eliza's window. His daughter, caught between worlds, trying to figure out who she was and what she wanted. And all Wade could do was stand back and hope he'd given her enough truth to navigate the lies that everyone else would try to sell her. He finished with the horse and headed inside, where the smell of dinner waited and his daughter sat at the table with a book. She looked up when he entered, her expression questioning. "Everything all right?" she asked. "Getting there," Wade said. "Eventually." It was the best truth he could offer. He hoped it would be enough. The following week brought no relief, only complications stacked upon complications like cordwood, waiting for a match. Wade spent his mornings managing ranch business and his afternoons navigating the minefield his life had become. Vivian had taken rooms at the Morrison boarding house and settled in like a general planning a siege, appearing at the ranch every other day with some new argument about Eliza's future. Each visit left his daughter more tense, more withdrawn, caught between love and resentment in a way that made Wade's chest ache. On Wednesday morning, Cal Mercer found Wade in the north pasture checking water levels. The summer had been dry, and the creek was running low enough to worry about. "Mr. Braddock," Cal said, riding up with that careful formality he'd adopted since their conversation. "Got word from town. There's trouble brewing." Wade straightened, wiping sweat from his forehead. "What kind?" "The kind where angry men drink too much and start talking about taking matters into their own hands." Cal's jaw was tight. "Jameson's been holding court at the saloon, telling everyone who'll listen that tribal raiders hit his place again last night. Says he lost 5 head of cattle and saw tracks leading north toward the camps." "Did he report it to the sheriff?" "Ridley's out of town, gone to the territorial capital on some business. Won't be back until Saturday." Wade swore under his breath. Perfect timing. Whether by accident or design, Cornelius Vandermeer had to be involved. The man had a talent for engineering situations where violence seemed like the only option. "How many men are we talking about?" "Maybe 15, 20, Cal said. "Mix of homesteaders and ranch hands looking for excitement. Jameson's working them up good, saying the law won't protect them, so they've got to protect themselves." Wade looked at the sun. 2 hours until noon. Not enough time to ride to the territorial capital and back. Not enough time to organize proper opposition. Just enough time for everything to go straight to hell if he didn't act fast. "Round up every hand we've got who can ride and shoot," Wade said. "Tell them to meet at the ranch in 30 minutes. Armed, but nobody fires unless I give the word. Understood?" "Yes, sir." Cal hesitated. "Miss Eliza was asking after you. Her mother came by again this morning." Wade closed his eyes briefly. "How bad?" Voices raised enough I could hear them from the barn. Miss Eliza looked about ready to break something when I passed the house. "Tell her I'll be back soon as I can, and Cal, don't mention the trouble in town. She doesn't need more weight to carry right now." Cal nodded and wheeled his horse around, kicking up dust as he galloped toward the ranch buildings. Wade followed at a slower pace, his mind working through scenarios, none of them good. If he rode out to stop Jameson's mob, he'd be seen as defending the tribal camps against his own people. That would cost him whatever political capital he still had with the settlers. But if he didn't ride out, innocent people would likely die, and the territory would explode into open conflict that would justify exactly the federal intervention Vandermeer wanted. Either way, he was trapped. By the time he reached the ranch, 8 men were assembled in the yard. Not a large force, but enough to make a statement. Cal was there, along with Tom White and the Hartley brothers, plus 4 other hands whose loyalty Wade had earned through fair treatment and honest pay. They sat their horses quietly, rifles visible but not threatening, waiting for orders. The screen door banged and Eliza came out onto the porch. She took one look at the assembled men and went pale. "Father, what's happening?" Wade swung down from his horse. "Trouble in town? Nothing you need to worry about." "Don't lie to me," Eliza said sharply. "I'm not a child and I'm not blind. Are people going after the tribal camps?" Wade looked at her, seeing again that uncomfortable mirror of his own stubbornness. There was no point lying. She'd find out anyway, and he'd taught her too well to accept comfortable falsehoods. Bill Jameson's stirring up a mob, he said. Claims raiders hit his herd. I'm going to make sure nobody does anything stupid before the sheriff gets back. By riding out with guns? By showing Jameson he's not the only one who can gather men, Wade said. Sometimes preventing violence means making it clear the cost will be too high. Eliza's hands clenched at her sides. What if someone gets hurt? Then I'll have failed, Wade said simply. But doing nothing guarantees people get hurt. At least this way there's a chance for talk before shooting. Your father's right, a voice said from behind Eliza. Wade turned to see Vivian standing in the doorway. She was dressed in riding clothes, practical ones this time, split skirt and a jacket that had seen actual use. Her hair was pulled back severely, and her face was set in an expression Wade remembered from the early years of their marriage, before everything went wrong. I'm coming with you, Vivian said. Wade stared. The hell you are. The hell I'm not. Vivian walked down the porch steps. You need someone those homesteaders will listen to, someone they won't dismiss as being too friendly with the tribal leaders. I'm Eastern, educated, respectable. Exactly the kind of person they're trying to protect with this vigilante nonsense. That's exactly why you shouldn't come, Wade said. You'll be in danger. I've been in danger since I married you, Vivian interrupted. The difference is I ran from it for 3 years instead of facing it. That ends today. Wade looked at Eliza, who seemed as shocked as he felt. Did you put her up to this? I didn't even know she was here, Eliza said. She just showed up this morning talking about proper education and Boston society like always, and then she gestured helplessly at her transformed mother. Vivian met Wade's eyes. Our daughter needs to see that her mother isn't just good at running away. She needs to see that I can stand for something that matters, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. For a long moment, Wade said nothing. Then he turned to Cal. Get her a horse. Something steady. Yes, sir. Vivian's expression flickered, surprise, perhaps, or gratitude, but she covered it quickly. Within minutes, she was mounted, sitting her horse with more confidence than Wade expected. She'd been a decent rider once, before Eastern life had made her soft. Apparently, some skills didn't fade completely. Stay behind me, Wade told her. If shooting starts, you run. No arguments, no heroics. Understood? Understood, Vivian said. They rode out, 12 in total now, following the road that led toward town and the tribal camps beyond. Eliza stood on the porch watching them go, her face unreadable, and Wade felt a pang of guilt for leaving her. But she was safer at the ranch than anywhere else right now. The ride took 40 minutes. They found Jameson's mob gathered at the crossroads where the main road split toward town and the camps. 23 men, Wade counted, all armed, all angry. Jameson himself stood at the front, red-faced and shouting something about justice and property rights. Wade held up his hand and his group stopped 50 yards away. The sight of them made Jameson's mob fall quiet, confusion rippling through the crowd. Bill, Wade called out, what's this about? You know damn well what it's about, Braddock, Jameson shouted back. Thieves taking what's mine. If the law won't protect us, we'll do it ourselves. The law will protect you when the sheriff gets back, Wade said. But riding up to those camps with guns is just asking for bloodshed. That what you want? Women and children dead because you can't wait 2 more days? I want my cattle back, Jameson snarled. I want these thieving savages to know they can't steal from honest men without consequences. You don't know they took anything, Wade said. You saw tracks, could have been anyone. Tracks leading north, Jameson said, toward their camps. You do the arithmetic, Braddock. I can do arithmetic just fine, Wade said. 23 angry men with guns equals a massacre. A massacre equals federal troops. Federal troops equal the end of whatever freedom we've still got in this territory. That's simple enough for you? Murmurs ran through Jameson's crowd. Some of the men were already looking uncertain. These were farmers and ranch hands, not soldiers. They'd come along on anger and whiskey, but facing Wade Braddock and his armed riders was making them reconsider the wisdom of vigilante justice. Then Cornelius Vandermeer stepped out of the crowd. Wade should have known. Mr. Braddock, Vandermeer said smoothly, how noble of you to intervene. But I'm afraid you're missing the larger picture. These good men aren't seeking violence, they're seeking security. protection for their families and livelihoods. They're seeking an excuse to attack people who can't defend themselves, Wade said, and you're giving it to them because it serves your interests. Vandermeer smiled. Such cynicism. I'm simply a concerned citizen who believes in property rights and the rule of law. The rule of law says we wait for the sheriff, Wade said. Unless you're claiming you know better than the law. I'm claiming the law has failed these men, Vandermeer said, repeatedly. And when law fails, citizens have the right, the duty, to protect themselves. By murdering innocent people? By taking reasonable precautions against known threats. The argument was going nowhere, and Wade knew it. Vandermeer was too skilled at rhetoric, too good at making violence sound reasonable. He needed to change tactics. That's when Vivian spoke up. Mr. Vandermeer, she said, her voice carrying across the space between the two groups, I wonder if you might explain something to me. Every head turned. Vivian urged her horse forward slightly, positioning herself where everyone could see her clearly. Mrs. Braddock, Vandermeer said, his smile widening. What a surprise! I heard you'd returned to the territory. Indeed, Vivian said, and I've been speaking with various people in town, trying to understand the situation here. One thing puzzles me, though. You've been advocating for removal of the tribal population for months, yet you've also been quietly purchasing land parcels surrounding their current territory. Doesn't that seem rather coincidental? Vandermeer's smile didn't waver, but something cold flickered in his eyes. Business is business, Mrs. Braddock. I invest where I see opportunity. Of course, Vivian said, but I'm curious. What opportunity exists in land that's currently controlled by treaty? Unless, of course, you expect that treaty to be broken, which would require some catalyst, some incident that would justify federal intervention and removal. The crowd was listening now, really listening. Several of Jameson's men were frowning, starting to see the shape of the manipulation. You're suggesting I would engineer violence for profit? Vandermeer said, his voice sharp. That's slander, madam. I'm suggesting you're a businessman who sees opportunity in chaos, Vivian said calmly, which makes you exactly the wrong person to be advising frightened farmers about their safety. You profit from their fear, Mr. Vandermeer. You profit from their anger. And you'll profit most of all if they do something terrible enough to bring federal troops down on this territory. Wade stared at his wife, seeing her fully for the first time in years. This was the woman he'd married, fierce, intelligent, unafraid to speak truth to power. Somewhere beneath the Eastern polish and society manners, she'd still been there all along. Jameson looked between Vandermeer and Vivian, confusion warring with anger on his face. Is that true? You buying up land around the camps? Public records, Vandermeer said tightly. As I told your husband, Mrs. Braddock, my investments are entirely legal and above board. Legal, certainly, Vivian agreed, but above board, that's debatable. Tell me, how many of these men know you own shares in the company that's been bidding for the water rights contract? The one that would control distribution throughout the Northern Territory if the current occupants were removed? Wade wanted to kiss her. He settled for backing her play. That's a fact, Bill, he said to Jameson. Vandermeer owns 40% of Western Territory's water company. They've been lobbying the territorial governor for exclusive rights to the northern watershed. Only problem is those rights are controlled by treaty. Remove the tribal population, break the treaty, and suddenly Vandermeer's investment becomes very valuable. Several of Jameson's men were actively backing away now, the anger draining from their faces as understanding dawned. They'd been used, manipulated into serving as the spark for Vandermeer's schemes. You son of a bitch, Jameson said to Vandermeer. You let me think. You made me believe. I made you believe nothing you weren't already inclined to believe, Vandermeer said coldly. The smooth mask was gone now, replaced by naked contempt. Your cattle are missing because you're a careless rancher, Jameson. Your farm is failing because you're lazy and stupid. Blaming others for your failures is easier than fixing them, and men like you are always looking for someone to blame. I simply pointed you in a useful direction. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Wade saw Jameson's hand drop to his gun, saw several other men make similar moves, and knew this could still spiral into violence despite everything. Bill, Wade said sharply, don't. He's not worth hanging for. Jameson's hand stopped, trembling. His face was purple with rage and humiliation, But underneath that, Wade saw something else. Shame. The man had been played for a fool, and he knew it. Go home, Wade said, speaking to the whole crowd now. All of you. Go home, sleep off the whiskey, and think about what almost happened here today. The sheriff will be back Saturday. File your complaints properly. Let the law handle this like it's supposed to be handled. Slowly, reluctantly, Jameson's mob began to disperse. Men mounted horses or climbed into wagons, avoiding each other's eyes, the weight of near disaster settling over them. Within 10 minutes, only Wade's group and Vandermeer remained at the crossroads. Vandermeer looked at Wade and Vivian with pure hatred. This isn't over, he said quietly. You've delayed the inevitable, but you haven't stopped it. Change is coming to this territory whether you approve or not. Change always comes, Wade said. Question is whether it's progress or just theft wearing a fancy suit. I know which one you represent. Vandermeer turned and walked toward town without another word. Wade watched him go, feeling no satisfaction in the victory. They'd won this round, but the war was far from over. Vivian rode up beside him. Her face was pale, her hands shaking slightly on the reins, but her voice was steady when she spoke. That was terrifying, she said. You didn't show it, Wade said. You were perfect. I was scared out of my mind. She looked at him. How do you do this? Carry this weight every day, knowing one wrong word could get people killed? You just do it, Wade said. Because the alternative is letting men like Vandermeer run roughshod over everyone too weak to fight back. They rode in silence for a while, the rest of the men keeping a respectful distance. Finally, Vivian spoke again. I left because I couldn't be what you needed, she said. A partner who could stand beside you in moments like that. I thought I was too weak, too civilized, too Eastern. But today I realized I was just too afraid. Of failing, of being inadequate, of looking at myself honestly and seeing a coward. Wade didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. Eliza shouldn't be like me, Vivian continued. She should be stronger, braver, more like you. She should be herself, Wade said. Not me, not you. Herself. What if herself chooses to stay here, with that ranch hand who looks at her like she hung the moon? Wade glanced at her. You noticed that, did you? I notice everything when it comes to our daughter, Vivian said. He's not suitable. No family, no prospects, no education. He's honest, hardworking, and smart as hell, Wade interrupted. And he looks at her like she's worth something beyond her face or her family name. That's rarer than you think. It's not enough. Maybe not for you, Wade said. But it might be for her. And if it is, we don't get to tell her she's wrong. Vivian was quiet for a long moment. I don't know how to let go of her. None of us do, Wade said. But we have to anyway. That's what being a parent means. They rode the rest of the way in silence. When they reached the ranch, Eliza was pacing the porch like a caged animal. She ran down the steps the moment she saw them. What happened? Is everyone all right? I heard riders go past an hour ago heading back toward town. Everyone's fine, Wade said, swinging down from his horse. We talked sense into them. No violence. Eliza looked at her mother, who was also dismounting with slightly less grace. You went? You actually went with him? I did, Vivian said. Her voice was tired but steady. And I discovered I'm braver than I thought. Or perhaps just more desperate to prove something to myself. Mother, Eliza started, then stopped, clearly not knowing what to say. I owe you an apology, Vivian said, for the past 3 years. For coming here with plans instead of questions, for assuming I knew what was best without asking what you wanted. She paused. I'm still not sure this life is right for you, but I'm starting to understand it might not be my decision to make. Eliza's eyes filled with tears. I don't know what I want either. That's what makes it so hard. So then take your time figuring it out, Vivian said. I'll be here, not pushing, not manipulating, just here. Wade left them there on the porch and went to help Cal with the horses. The young man worked silently for a moment before speaking. Everyone's saying you stopped a massacre today, sir. Just stopped stupid from turning into tragic, Wade said. Not the same thing. Still, Cal hesitated. Miss Eliza asked me something yesterday, about whether I thought she should go to Boston. Wade's hand stilled on the saddle. What'd you tell her? Told her I couldn't answer that question for her. Told her she was smart enough to know her own mind. Cal met Wade's eyes. But I also told her I hoped she stayed. Not for me. I know I'm not suitable for someone like her, but because this country needs people like her, people who are smart and brave and refuse to be broken by hard things. You sell yourself short, Wade said. You're more suitable than half the society boys her mother would pick. That's kind of you to say, sir, but we both know how the world works. I'm a ranch hand with no family name and $50 to my name. She's... Cal stopped, swallowing hard. She's everything bright in this hard country, and I'm not fool enough to think I deserve any claim on that. Wade studied the young man. You know what I think? I think you're exactly the kind of man this territory was supposed to create. Honest, capable, judging people by their character instead of their circumstances. If Eliza chooses you, she'll be choosing well. Cal's face showed naked hope for just a moment before he shuddered it away. Won't matter if she chooses Boston. Won't matter if you don't fight for what you want, Wade corrected. But fighting doesn't mean pushing or demanding. It means showing her who you really are and trusting her to see it clearly. Yes, sir. They finished with the horses in silence. When Wade walked back to the house, Vivian and Eliza were still on the porch, sitting together on the steps, talking quietly. Wade went inside and poured himself a drink, watching through the window as his estranged wife and his daughter tried to rebuild something that had been broken for too long. The next 3 days passed in uneasy calm. The sheriff returned on Saturday and took statements about the missing cattle, though everyone knew nothing would come of it. Jameson was subdued, humiliated by how thoroughly Vandermeer had manipulated him. The tribal camps remained quiet, though Wade rode out twice to check on them and found Standing Bear preparing for trouble he knew was still coming. On Sunday evening, a rider came from town with news that made Wade's blood run cold. Territorial Governor Marcus Weatherby was coming to personally investigate the situation. He'd arrive in 4 days with a federal marshal and a military escort. Vandermeer had won after all. He'd just changed tactics, going over everyone's head directly to the territorial government. The investigation would be a formality. The decision had already been made. The tribal population would be removed, the land would be open to settlement, and Vandermeer would secure his water rights. Wade stood in his yard holding the message, watching the sun set behind the western peaks, and wondered if there was any move left to make that wouldn't end in disaster. Behind him, the screen door opened. He didn't need to turn around to know it was Vivian. "Bad news?" she asked. "The worst." She came to stand beside him. "Tell me." So he did. Explained the politics, the power plays, the inevitable outcome. When he finished, Vivian was quiet for a long time. "There has to be something we can do," she said finally. "I'm open to suggestions. What if we made it public? Everything Vandermeer's doing, his land purchases, his water rights scheme, his manipulation of the homesteaders. Expose him before the governor arrives." Wade shook his head. "We'd need proof, documentation, things Vandermeer's too smart to leave lying around. Then we find the proof." "How?" Vivian smiled grimly. "By doing what Eastern society taught me best. We infiltrate. We gather information. We use his own arrogance against him." Wade looked at her. "You're talking about something dangerous." "I'm talking about fighting for something that matters," Vivian said, "which is what I should have been doing all along instead of running away." For the first time since she'd returned, Wade felt a flicker of the old feeling, the partnership they'd once had, the sense that together they could face anything. It scared him almost as much as the coming confrontation with the territorial governor. "All right," he said. "Let's figure out how to take down Cornelius Vandermeer before he destroys everything decent left in this territory." Vivian's smile was fierce and wild, and for just a moment she looked like the woman who'd ridden into Montana with him 20 years ago, ready to build something new in hard country. Maybe she'd never truly left after all. Maybe she'd just been buried under fear and disappointment, waiting for a reason to fight her way back to the surface. Wade hoped it wasn't too late for both of them to remember who they used to be before the weight of the world had pressed them into shapes they'd never meant to take. The plan came together over coffee at the kitchen table that night. Wade and Vivian bent over papers while Eliza listened from the doorway, her face pale but determined. They needed documentation, hard proof of Vandermeer's schemes that would force the territorial governor to see past the polished lies and political manipulation. But getting that proof meant infiltrating Vandermeer's inner circle, and that required someone he would trust enough to let his guard down. "It has to be me," Vivian said. "I'm exactly what he expects. Eastern, educated, respectable. A woman he can patronize and dismiss as harmless." "He's not stupid," Wade said. "After what you did at the crossroads, he knows you're dangerous. Which is why I'll apologize," Vivian said calmly. "I'll tell him I was overwrought, protective of my daughter, not thinking clearly. I'll play the role he wants to see. The refined lady who briefly lost her composure but has now remembered her place." Wade's jaw tightened. "I don't like it." "You don't have to like it. You just have to let me do what I'm good at." Vivian met his eyes. "I spent 3 years in Boston society, Wade. I know how to smile and flatter and make powerful men believe I'm too shallow to be a threat. It's the one skill I learned back east that's actually worth something out here." Eliza stepped into the room. "What exactly are you looking for?" "Correspondence," Vivian said. "Contracts. Anything that shows his land purchases were coordinated with his lobbying for removal. Anything that proves he knew about the water rights deal before he started buying property. We need to show intent, that he deliberately manufactured this crisis for profit." "Where would he keep documents like that?" Eliza asked. "His office, most likely," Wade said. "Above the bank building in town. But it's locked, and he keeps irregular hours. Getting in would be easier if someone distracted him," Eliza interrupted. "Someone young and naive who might ask questions about Boston society and educational opportunities." Both parents turned to stare at her. "Absolutely not," Wade said. "Father, I'm not a child, which is exactly why you're not doing this," Wade said. "If Vandermeer even suspects we're working against him, he'll use you to get to me. I won't risk that." "He already sees me as a pawn," Eliza said. "Mother's been parading me around town talking about my future, my prospects. Vandermeer thinks I'm just another frontier girl waiting to be civilized. Let him think that. Let him think I'm curious about his connections in Boston." Vivian looked at her daughter with something between pride and horror. "You understand what you'd be doing? Lying to a dangerous man, playing a role, putting yourself in the same position you're putting yourself in," Eliza said. "Except I have less to lose. He can't use me against you if he doesn't know we're working together." Wade stood and walked to the window, his hands clenched. Every instinct screamed against involving his daughter in something this risky. But Eliza was right. Vandermeer already saw her as a playing piece, something to be moved around the board. Using that perception against him made cold, tactical sense. It also terrified him. "If we do this," he said without turning around, "you follow every instruction exactly. No improvising, no heroics, no taking risks I haven't approved. Understood?" "Understood," Eliza said. Wade turned back to face them. "Then here's how it works. Vivian, you approach Vandermeer tomorrow, apologize for your outburst. Ask his advice about Eliza's future. Make him feel important, flatter his ego. Once you've reestablished yourself as harmless, you start working on access to his office." "And me?" Eliza asked. "You play the eager student," Wade said. "Curious about Boston, about society, about how the world works beyond this frontier. You ask questions that make him feel superior, questions he'll want to answer because it proves how much smarter he is than everyone else." "What kind of questions?" "About influence," Vivian said, understanding immediately. "About how decisions get made, who holds real power, how a man like him manages to achieve so much. Let him brag. Men like Vandermeer can't resist explaining their own cleverness." They spent the next 2 hours refining the plan, going over scenarios, preparing responses to likely questions. By the time they finished, the lamp oil was running low and the night had grown cold. Eliza went to bed, but Wade and Vivian remained at the table, the weight of what they were planning settling over them. "I failed her," Vivian said quietly. "These past 3 years. I convinced myself I was protecting her by leaving, but really I was just protecting myself from having to watch her grow up in a world I couldn't control." "You're here now," Wade said. "That counts for something." "Does it? Or am I just trying to assuage my guilt by putting her in danger?" Wade reached across the table and took her hand, the first time he'd touched her deliberately in 3 years. "You're trying to teach her that running from hard things doesn't make them go away. That's not guilt. That's courage." Vivian's fingers tightened around his. I forgot how much I needed this. Someone who doesn't lie to me about how hard everything is. Is that why you left? Because I wouldn't pretend? She was quiet for a long time. I left because I looked at you every day and saw everything I wasn't brave enough to be. It was easier to hate you for being strong than to face my own weakness. You're not weak, Wade said. You're just afraid. There's a difference. Is there? Weak people don't ride out to face down a mob with nothing but words. Weak people don't plan to infiltrate a corrupt politician's operation to save strangers they've never met. You've got spine, Vivian. You just convinced yourself you didn't because the alternative was too painful. She looked at him with tears in her eyes. I loved you so much it terrified me. The thought of losing you, of watching this country break you down, of seeing you die for principles that wouldn't protect you. I couldn't bear it, so I left before the waiting killed me. Wade stood, pulling her up with him. For a moment they just stood there, hands clasped, 3 years of silence and pain hanging between them like smoke. I never stopped loving you, he said. I was angry, hurt, bitter as hell, but I never stopped. Even when I abandoned you? Even then. Vivian stepped closer, resting her forehead against his chest. He wrapped his arms around her, feeling her shake with suppressed sobs, and let her cry. They stood that way for a long time, holding on to each other in the dark kitchen while the wind rattled the windows and the future waited just beyond the morning. The next day dawned clear and cold, autumn finally showing its teeth. Vivian dressed carefully for her meeting with Vandermeer, stylish but not ostentatious, refined but approachable. She looked every inch the Eastern lady come west, exactly the image Vandermeer would expect and dismiss. Wade watched her prepare with a knot of anxiety in his stomach. You don't have to do this. Yes, I do. Vivian adjusted her hat in the mirror. For Eliza, for those families in the tribal camps, for the version of myself I left behind when I ran to Boston. Just be careful. Careful is what got me nowhere for 3 years, Vivian said. But I'll be smart. That's better. She rode into town alone, leaving Wade to pace the ranch like a caged animal. Cal noticed his agitation and wisely stayed out of his way, directing the other hands to tasks that kept them far from the house. Only Eliza dared approach him, finding him in the barn pretending to organize tack that didn't need organizing. She'll be fine, Eliza said. Mother's tougher than she looks. I know that, Wade said. Doesn't mean I can't worry. Is this what it was like? When you were married, I mean? Before everything went wrong? Wade set down the bridle he'd been holding. Yeah, exactly like this. She'd go do something brave and terrifying, and I'd wait and worry and try to pretend I wasn't dying inside until she came back safe. Why didn't you tell her to stop? Because telling your mother to stop being herself would be like telling the sun not to rise. She's got fire in her, always has. I fell in love with that fire. Couldn't very well try to put it out just because it scared me sometimes. Eliza was quiet for a moment. Cal asked me yesterday if I'd made a decision. About Boston. Wade's hand stilled. What'd you tell him? That I didn't know yet. That I was still figuring things out. She paused. But I think I'm lying to myself. I think I know exactly what I want, and I'm just afraid to admit it because it means disappointing someone. Your mother or me? Both of you, maybe. Or neither. I don't know. Eliza sat on a hay bale, her expression troubled. Mother wants me to have opportunities she never had. You want me to choose my own path. But what if my path is something neither of you expected? What if I want to stay here but not live the life you've lived? What if I want to build something new instead of inheriting something old? Wade sat beside her. Then you build it. That's what this country is supposed to be for, people who want to create their own futures instead of accepting the ones handed to them. Even if it involves a ranch hand with no family and no prospects, especially if it involves him, Wade said. Cal Mercer's got more integrity than most men with famous names and fat bank accounts. If you choose him, you're choosing someone who will stand beside you instead of expecting you to follow behind. You sound like you approve. I do, Wade said simply. Your mother might take some convincing, but she'll come around. She's learning to see past the surface to what actually matters. What if I'm wrong about him? What if I'm just young and foolish and mistaking infatuation for something real? Wade smiled. Then you'll be wrong, and you'll figure it out, and you'll make better choices next time. That's called living, Eliza. Nobody gets it perfect on the first try. Vivian returned just before noon, her face flushed with cold and triumph. She'd spent 2 hours with Vandermeer, she reported, playing the role perfectly. She'd apologized for her outburst at the crossroads, blamed it on maternal anxiety and the stress of returning to frontier life. Vandermeer had accepted her contrition with oily magnanimity, clearly pleased to have his assumptions about feminine weakness confirmed. Then she'd asked his advice about Eliza's future. He ate it up, Vivian said, pacing the kitchen with nervous energy. Told me all about his connections in Boston, the families he knows, the opportunities he could arrange. I played the grateful mother, thanked him profusely, asked if Eliza might call on him to discuss the details. And? Wade prompted. He suggested Thursday afternoon, said he keeps office hours then for local business, but he'd be happy to make time for such an important consultation. Vivian's smile was sharp. He also mentioned he has a meeting with the territorial governor's advance team on Friday morning, which means Thursday afternoon his office will be full of documents related to the governor's visit. That's cutting it close, Wade said. The governor arrives Saturday. If we don't find what we need Thursday, there's no second chance. Which is why we need to be thorough, Vivian said. Eliza keeps him occupied downstairs while I search his office upstairs. We need at least an hour, maybe more. Can you keep him talking that long? Wade asked Eliza. If I ask enough naive questions about Boston society and educational opportunities, Eliza said. Easily. Men like Vandermeer love explaining things to young women they consider ignorant. The next 2 days crawled past like wounded animals. Wade tried to focus on ranch business but found himself constantly distracted, running through scenarios in his head, imagining everything that could go wrong. Cal noticed his preoccupation and finally cornered him in the stable on Wednesday evening. Mr. Braddock, if there's something happening I should know about. There's not, Wade said. With respect, sir, that's horse shit. You've been wound tighter than a $2 watch since Monday. Miss Eliza looks like she's preparing for battle, and Mrs. Braddock keeps riding into town at odd hours. If there's trouble coming, I'd like to know so I can help. Wade studied the young man. Cal was sharp, observant, loyal, exactly the kind of person they might need if things went sideways. Thursday afternoon, Wade said quietly. That's when trouble might come. If it does, I need you ready to ride hard and fast. Can you do that without asking questions? Yes, sir. And Cal, if something happens to me, you make sure Eliza gets somewhere safe. Doesn't matter where, just safe, understood? Cal's face went pale. Sir, what exactly are you planning? Insurance, Wade interrupted. Just insurance. Probably won't need it. But if I do, I need to know someone's watching out for my daughter. Always, Cal said quietly, even without you asking. Wade clasped his shoulder briefly. I know. That's why I'm asking. Thursday dawned gray and threatening, clouds piling up over the mountains like omens. Vivian dressed in her finest while Eliza chose something young and innocent, the kind of outfit that made her look like a frontier girl playing at being sophisticated. They were both pale, both tense, but their voices were steady when they spoke. Remember, Wade said as they prepared to leave, if anything feels wrong, you get out. Doesn't matter if you found what you need or not. Your safety matters more than any documents. We'll be fine, Vivian said, but she hugged him hard before leaving, pressing her face against his chest for a long moment. Eliza kissed his cheek. Don't worry, Father. We're Braddocks. We don't break easy. Wade watched them ride toward town, then saddled his own horse. He'd wait at the edge of town, close enough to respond if needed, but far enough away not to be conspicuous. Cal would watch from the stable, and Tom White would keep an eye on the street from the general store. If Vandermeer suspected anything, if anyone raised an alarm, they'd know within minutes. The hours crept past with agonizing slowness. Wade sat his horse in the shadow of the old church, watching the street, counting carriages, marking the movement of people through town. At 2:30, he saw Eliza and Vivian enter Vandermeer's building. At 2:45, he saw Vandermeer himself arrive, ushered upstairs by his clerk. Then nothing. Just waiting and watching and trying not to imagine disaster. Inside Vandermeer's office, Eliza sat across from the man himself and tried to look impressed by his stories. He was in fine form, expansive and self-satisfied, explaining the intricacies of Boston society with the air of a professor instructing a particularly slow student. The key to success in refined circles, he was saying, is understanding that everything is about connections. It's not what you know, but who you know, and more importantly, who knows you favorably. That sounds complicated, Eliza said, widening her eyes slightly. It can be for those unprepared for it, Vandermeer said. But with proper guidance, my guidance, for instance, a young woman of reasonable intelligence and acceptable appearance can navigate those waters successfully. Upstairs, Vivian worked through Vandermeer's desk with practiced efficiency. She'd learned to pick simple locks years ago, a skill acquired during a misspent youth her parents never knew about, and the desk drawer yielded easily. Inside, she found correspondence, contracts, ledgers recording land purchases and financial transactions. She photographed everything with the small camera Wade had procured from a traveling salesman, working quickly but carefully, making sure each page was clear and legible. Letters to the territorial governor suggesting the tribal situation was becoming untenable. Contracts for land purchases dated before the current crisis began. Financial records showing payments to intermediaries who'd been spreading rumors about cattle theft. It was all there. Proof of conspiracy, manipulation, deliberate engineering of conflict for profit. Enough to destroy Vandermeer's reputation and derail his schemes if presented to the right people. Vivian's heart shook slightly as she worked, adrenaline and fear making her fingers clumsy. She forced herself to breathe slowly, to focus on each task, each photograph, each careful replacement of documents in exactly the position she'd found them. Downstairs, Eliza kept Vandermeer talking. "And what about young women who wish to pursue education beyond finishing school?" she asked. "Are there opportunities in Boston for serious academic study?" Vandermeer waved a dismissive hand. "For exceptional cases, perhaps. Though I've found that most women are happier focusing on accomplishments that prepare them for their natural roles as wives and mothers. Art, music, literature, these refine the spirit without taxing the intellect unduly." "I see," Eliza said, swallowing the anger that rose in her throat. "And you've helped many young women find their place in Boston society?" "Indeed. It's something of a passion of mine, shepherding deserving young people toward proper futures." "How generous of you." The conversation continued, Vandermeer growing more pompous with each passing minute, Eliza maintaining her facade of wide-eyed interest. She watched the clock on the mantel, counting minutes, calculating how much longer her mother needed. Vivian finished with the desk and moved to the filing cabinets. More documents here. Water rights proposals, maps showing land divisions, correspondence with railroad companies about future development. She photographed everything relevant, her mind racing to connect the pieces into a coherent picture of Vandermeer's empire building. Then she heard footsteps on the stairs. Vivian froze, her heart hammering. The footsteps passed by, someone going to another office on the floor. She forced herself to breathe, to continue working, but the near discovery had rattled her. She needed to finish and get out before her luck ran dry. 10 more minutes of frantic photography, then she carefully closed the cabinets, checked that everything looked undisturbed, and slipped out of the office. The hallway was empty. She descended the back stairs quickly, emerging into the alley behind the building. She'd done it. They had what they needed. Wade saw her exit and felt relief crash over him like a wave. He watched her make her way casually around to the front of the building, then enter through the main door as if she'd just arrived. Perfect. No one would connect her presence to any disturbance upstairs. Inside, Vivian appeared in Vandermeer's doorway, slightly breathless. "I apologize for my tardiness," she said. "I was delayed at the milliner's. Have I missed much of the consultation?" Vandermeer rose, all polite concern. "Not at all, Mrs. Braddock. Miss Eliza and I have been having a delightful conversation about her prospects. Please join us." They spent another 30 minutes playing their roles before Vivian declared they'd taken enough of Mr. Vandermeer's valuable time. He escorted them to the door with oily courtesy, promising to write letters of introduction to his Boston contacts. "Such charming ladies," he said. "The frontier is fortunate to host such refinement, however temporarily." Outside, Vivian and Eliza walked calmly to their horses, mounted, and rode sedately out of town. Only when they were well clear of observers did they kick their horses to a faster pace, racing toward the ranch and Wade. They found him waiting in the yard, and Vivian nearly fell from her saddle in her haste to dismount. She pulled the camera from her bag, her eyes bright with triumph. "We got it," she said. "Everything. Letters, contracts, financial records, maps, enough to prove conspiracy, fraud, and corruption. Enough to destroy him." Wade pulled her into a fierce embrace. Then Eliza, holding both of them tight. You were magnificent, he said. Both of you. Reckless and terrifying, but magnificent. What do we do now? Eliza asked. Now we develop these photographs and prepare our case, Wade said. The governor arrives Saturday with his retinue. We need to get this evidence to him before Vandermeer can poison his perspective. They went inside, giddy with success and relief, and set about the careful work of developing the photographs in the dark room Wade had set up years ago for documenting ranch records. The images emerged slowly, each one a small victory, until they had a complete file documenting Vandermeer's entire scheme. But their celebration was cut short by the sound of horses approaching at speed. Wade went to the window and saw Sheriff Ridley riding hard toward the house, his face grim. Wade stepped onto the porch. Tom, what's wrong? It's the tribal camps, Ridley said, swinging down from his horse. Someone set fire to their food stores last night, burned everything they had for winter. Chief Standing Bear is saying if the law won't protect them, they'll protect themselves. And Jameson's organizing another mob, saying this proves they're dangerous, need to be removed before they retaliate. Wade felt ice settle in his stomach. When did this happen? Sometime between midnight and dawn. They didn't discover it until morning. Ridley looked exhausted. Wade, I can't control this situation alone. The whole territory is about to explode, and I don't have the men or the authority to stop it. The governor needs to get here now, not Saturday. Can you send word to move up his arrival? Already did. But even if he leaves immediately, it'll be tomorrow evening before he arrives. That's 24 hours for everything to go to hell. Wade looked back into the house where Vivian and Eliza stood frozen, listening. The evidence they'd gathered didn't matter if the territory tore itself apart before they could present it. They needed to buy time, prevent violence long enough for the truth to come out. I'll talk to Standing Bear, Wade said. Get him to hold his people back. And the homesteaders? You handle them. Remind them that starting a war before the territorial governor arrives is the stupidest possible move. They're past listening to reason, Ridley said. Fear's got them by the throat. Then find someone they will listen to, Wade snapped. He turned to Vivian. Get to the Morrison brothers. Tell them if they want their stores left standing, they need to start talking sense into their customers. Economic self-interest is a powerful motivator. Vivian nodded and grabbed her coat. Eliza, you stay here, Wade said. Get those photographs organized and ready to present. If this goes wrong, we need that evidence preserved and protected. Father? Not up for discussion, Wade said. His voice was hard, final. You did your part. Now let me do mine. He rode north toward the tribal camps with Ridley beside him, pushing their horses hard. Behind them, Vivian headed for town, and Eliza retreated into the house with their evidence. The pieces were moving into position for a confrontation that would determine the future of everyone in the territory. Wade just hoped they'd all survive long enough to see that future arrive. The smell of smoke still hung over the tribal camps when Wade and Sheriff Ridley arrived. Charred timbers marked where the food storage had stood. A winter's worth of provisions reduced to ash and bitter memory. Standing Bear and his council gathered near the ruins, their faces carved from stone, and Wade knew immediately that talking them down from retaliation would be the hardest negotiation of his life. Running Deer met them at the edge of the camp, her jaw tight with fury barely contained. You come to tell us to be calm, she said, to accept this quietly while we starve? I come to ask you not to give Vandermeer exactly what he wants, Wade said, dismounting. That's what this was, provocation designed to make you strike back so he can justify removal. We know what it was, Running Deer said. We are not children to be fooled by obvious tricks, but knowing a trap exists doesn't fill empty bellies when winter comes. Standing Bear approached, his weathered face showing the weight of leadership that allowed no good choices. Braddock, you bring words or solutions? Both, I hope, Wade said. The territorial governor arrives tomorrow. I have evidence that proves Vandermeer engineered this entire crisis. If you can hold your people back one more day, I can show the governor the truth. And if he does not care about truth? Standing Bear asked quietly. Powerful men rarely do when lies serve them better. Then we'll have lost nothing by trying, Wade said. But if you retaliate now, if there's violence before he arrives, the truth won't matter. He'll see exactly what Vandermeer wants him to see. Dangerous natives threatening peaceful settlers. We are not the danger here. I know that, but the governor doesn't. Not yet. Wade met the chief's eyes. Give me 1 day, 24 hours to make him see what's really happening in this territory. Standing Bear was silent for a long moment, looking at the ruins of their food stores, then at the faces of his people. Finally, he spoke in his own language to the council members. They argued, voices rising and falling, hands gesturing sharply. Wade waited, knowing this was not his decision to influence. At last, Standing Bear turned back to him. 1 day. But if your governor does not act, we will. We will not sit passive while our children starve to prove we are civilized enough to deserve justice. Fair enough, Wade said. I'll send supplies from my ranch. Won't replace what you lost, but it'll help until we can sort this out properly. We do not need charity. It's not charity, Wade interrupted. It's what neighbors do when someone's barn burns. You do the same for me. Running Deer's expression softened slightly. You are a strange man, Wade Braddock. You give us honesty when others offer lies and respect when others offer pity. But even you cannot protect us from the hunger that comes when powerful men want what we have. Maybe not, Wade said. But I can damn sure try. He rode back toward town with Ridley, his mind already calculating how much food he could spare from his own stores without leaving his ranch short. It would be tight, but they'd manage. They always did. You really think the governor will listen? Ridley asked. I think he'll have no choice when we lay out the evidence, Wade said. Vandermeer's been too clever for his own good, kept records of everything because he never thought anyone would dare look. Now those records are going to bury him. If we live long enough to present them. There's that, Wade agreed grimly. They found the situation in town barely better than at the camps. Jameson had gathered his usual crowd at the saloon, their voices carrying through the evening air, angry and afraid and looking for someone to blame. Ridley went to disperse them while Wade headed for the Morrison Brothers store, where Vivian was supposed to be working her particular brand of persuasion. He found her holding court in the Mercantile, surrounded by the town's business owners. The Morrison brothers, the hotel keeper, the livery owner, even old Mrs. Chen, who ran the laundry, all listening as Vivian laid out the economic reality in language they couldn't ignore. If this territory descends into violence, she was saying, federal troops will occupy it for months, maybe years. They'll impose martial law, restrict movement, interfere with commerce. Your businesses will suffer. Your profits will vanish. All because a few frightened men couldn't wait 2 days for proper governance to arrive. But the tribal raiders, Joseph Morrison started. There are no tribal raiders, Vivian said sharply. There's a corrupt politician manufacturing a crisis to steal land and water rights. Wade has proof, documents, contracts, letters, everything needed to expose Cornelius Vandermeer's scheme, but that evidence means nothing if this town tears itself apart before the governor sees it. Why should we believe Braddock? Someone in the back called. He's always taken their side. He's taken the side of truth, Vivian interrupted, which is more than most of you can claim. You've let fear make you stupid, let Vandermeer manipulate you into serving his interests while pretending it's about your safety. Her voice cut through the room like a blade. I left this territory 3 years ago because I was tired of the violence, tired of the constant struggle, tired of watching good people destroy each other over lies. I came back to find nothing had changed. You're still letting fear rule you, still choosing easy answers over hard truth. Well, I'm done being polite about it. Either you help Wade stop this insanity, or you're complicit in everything that happens next. The room fell silent. Wade watched his wife command the space with the same fierce authority she'd shown at the crossroads, and felt something shift in his chest. This was who she'd always been underneath the Eastern polish, a woman who refused to accept injustice even when fighting it cost her everything. Samuel Morrison cleared his throat. What exactly are you asking us to do, Mrs. Braddock? Talk to your neighbors, Vivian said. Your customers, your friends, anyone who'll listen. Tell them the governor arrives tomorrow. Tell them violence before then destroys any chance of justice. Tell them that if they want to protect their families and their futures, they need to be smart instead of reactive. And if they won't listen, then you close your businesses tomorrow, Vivian said flatly. Deny them supplies, services, everything they need to organize a mob. Make it clear that anyone who participates in violence tonight will find themselves unwelcome in every establishment in town. That's harsh, the hotel keeper said. Harsh is watching innocent people die because you were too cowardly to take a stand, Vivian shot back. Choose which version of Harsh you can live with. Slowly, reluctantly, heads began to nod. The business owners dispersed with orders to spread the word, and Vivian sagged slightly once they were gone, the energy that had sustained her performance draining away. Wade crossed to her side. That was something. That was terrifying, Vivian corrected. I have no idea if it worked. It worked enough, Wade said. You gave them permission to do the right thing. Sometimes that's all people need. Vivian looked at him, her eyes bright with exhaustion and something else, pride maybe, or the fierce satisfaction of having stood for something that mattered. I should have done this 3 years ago, should have fought instead of running. You're fighting now, Wade said. That's what counts. They rode back to the ranch together as darkness fell, finding Eliza bent over the photographs in the lamplight, organizing them into a coherent narrative of corruption. She looked up when they entered, her face tight with concentration. I've arranged everything chronologically, she said. Land purchases here, correspondence with the governor here, financial records showing payments to provocateurs here. It tells a clear story. Vandermeer identified the water rights opportunity 18 months ago, began acquiring surrounding land, then systematically engineered conflict to justify removal. Good work, Wade said. He looked at the evidence spread across the table, paper and ink that represented the difference between justice and catastrophe. The governor arrives tomorrow evening. We need to get this to him before Vandermeer can frame the narrative. How? Vivian asked. Vandermeer will have access to the governor immediately. He's been planning this presentation for weeks. Then we ambush him, Wade said. Make the presentation public, in front of witnesses who can't be silenced. Force the truth into the open where Vandermeer can't control it. The town celebration, Eliza said suddenly. Tomorrow's the territorial founding celebration. There'll be speeches, presentations, the governor addressing the crowd. If we could get access to that platform, Vandermeer controls the organizing committee, Vivian said. They won't let Wade anywhere near the speaking program. They might let me, Eliza said. I'm supposed to be giving a brief welcome on behalf of the territory's young people. It's ceremonial, meaningless, but it gets me on that platform. Wade shook his head immediately. Too dangerous. If you confront Vandermeer publicly, he'll retaliate. I won't put you in his crosshairs like that. I'm already in his crosshairs, Eliza said. We all are. The only question is whether we use that exposure for something meaningful. She looked at her father with absolute clarity. You taught me to stand for what's right even when it's hard. Let me do it. Eliza, she's right, Vivian said quietly. As much as I hate it, she's right. A young woman making these accusations will be harder for Vandermeer to dismiss than you would be. He's positioned you as biased, compromised by your sympathy for the tribal population. But Eliza is supposed to represent the territory's innocent future. If she exposes him, it carries different weight. Wade looked between his wife and daughter, seeing the same stubborn determination in both their faces. They were asking him to let his child walk into danger, to use her as the weapon that would bring down a corrupt and desperate man. Every instinct screamed against it, but they were also right. If we do this, he said slowly, we do it smart. Cal and Tom White will be in the crowd, armed and watching. First sign of trouble, they get you out. Understood? Understood, Eliza said. And you don't improvise. We script exactly what you say, every word, so there's no ambiguity about the accusations. All right? And after it's done, you come straight home. No lingering, no celebrating, no taking chances with Vandermeer's response. Father, Eliza said gently, I'll be careful. I promise. They spent the night preparing. Wade wrote and rewrote Eliza's speech, crafting language that was clear and damning, but legally defensible. Vivian coached her on delivery, on how to project authority without seeming strident, how to command attention from a hostile crowd. They rehearsed until Eliza could recite it perfectly, until the words felt natural instead of scripted. Somewhere past midnight, Wade found himself alone with Vivian on the porch, while Eliza slept inside. The stars were brilliant overhead, indifferent to human struggles, and the night wind carried the smell of coming winter. I'm terrified, Vivian said quietly. Me too. If anything happens to her, it won't, Wade said, though he had no way to guarantee that. She's smart, brave, and she'll have protection. That's all we can give her." Vivian leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. "When did our daughter become braver than both of us?" "She always was," Wade said. "We just finally gave her room to show it." They stood that way for a long time, taking what comfort they could from each other's presence, while the night slowly gave way to the gray promise of morning. When dawn finally broke, it came cold and clear. Perfect weather for the territorial celebration. Perfect weather for confrontation. The town began preparing early. Bunting went up on storefronts, a platform was erected in the main square, and people drifted in from surrounding homesteads, eager for the festivities. The territorial governor would arrive by late afternoon, they'd been told, and would address the crowd at sunset. There would be music, food, speeches celebrating the territory's progress and promise. It would have been pleasant if not for the tension crackling beneath the surface like electricity before a storm. Wade positioned his people carefully. Cal and Tom White mixed with the crowd, looking like ordinary celebrants but staying close to the platform. Sheriff Ridley kept visible, his presence a reminder that law still existed even if it felt fragile. The Morrison brothers made sure the saloon stayed closed until after the speeches. No alcohol to fuel bad decisions before the governor heard the truth. Vivian stayed with Eliza, helping her dress in something appropriate for a public presentation. Simple, respectable, the image of frontier youth at its finest. They didn't speak much, both too nervous for casual conversation, but Vivian held her daughter's hand tightly as they walked toward the town square. Wade watched them go and felt his heart clench. He'd faced down mobs, negotiated with desperate men, stared death in the face more times than he could count. But watching his daughter walk toward danger he couldn't control was harder than any of it. The afternoon crawled past with agonizing slowness. Wade tried to look casual, leaning against the mercantile wall, but every muscle was taut with readiness. He saw Vandermeer arrive, all smiles and confident authority, working the crowd like a politician born to it. The man had no idea what was coming, and Wade took vicious satisfaction in that ignorance. At 5:30, the territorial governor's carriage rolled into town. Marcus Weatherby was a tall man in his 60s, silver-haired and dignified, with the bearing of someone accustomed to authority. He emerged from the carriage flanked by aides and a federal marshal whose presence was meant to intimidate. Vandermeer greeted him effusively, clearly intending to monopolize his attention. But the program was set. The governor would hear from local leaders first, then make his own address. Vandermeer couldn't change that without looking desperate. As the sun touched the western peaks, the crowd gathered before the platform. Wade counted close to 300 people, the largest assembly the territory had seen in years. They came from town and ranches, homesteads, and mining camps, drawn by curiosity and the promise of spectacle. The ceremony began with the usual formalities. The mayor spoke briefly, thanking the governor for his visit. A minister offered a blessing that Wade barely heard. Then Vandermeer took the platform, his voice smooth and persuasive as he outlined the territory's challenges and opportunities. "We stand at a crossroads," he was saying, "between the wild past and the civilized future, between chaos and order. The decisions made here in the coming days will determine which path we take, which vision of progress we embrace. I trust that our esteemed governor will guide us toward the future this territory deserves." Applause rippled through the crowd. Vandermeer stepped down, satisfaction clear on his face. He thought he'd set the stage perfectly, framed the narrative in terms that made removal seem inevitable and proper. Then Eliza was called to the platform. She climbed the steps with steady grace, her face calm despite the fear Wade knew she must be feeling. The crowd quieted, curious about what the young woman would say. Ceremonial welcomes were usually brief and forgettable. Eliza looked out at the assembled faces and began to speak. "Governor Weatherby, honored guests, fellow citizens, I'm supposed to welcome you with pleasant words about our territory's bright future. But I can't do that. I can't stand here and pretend everything is fine when it's not." Murmurs ran through the crowd. Vandermeer's head snapped up, his expression shifting from complacency to alarm. "For months," Eliza continued, her voice carrying clearly, "this territory has been manipulated, frightened, turned against itself by a man who saw opportunity in our division. That man is Cornelius Vandermeer, and I have proof of his corruption." The crowd erupted. Vandermeer surged toward the platform, but Sheriff Ridley blocked his path, one hand on his gun. The governor's marshal moved forward, but Weatherby himself held up a hand, clearly intrigued. "Let her speak," the governor said. Eliza pulled photographs from the folder she'd been carrying. These are copies of Mr. Vandermeer's private correspondence and financial records. They show that 18 months ago, he identified the northern watershed as valuable for water rights development. He began purchasing surrounding land through intermediaries. Then, when the tribal population stood in the way of his plans, he systematically engineered conflict to justify their removal. She held up a photograph. This letter to the territorial capital requests military intervention, written 3 months before any livestock went missing. This contract shows land purchases made before the current crisis began. These financial records show payments to individuals who spread rumors and accusations against the tribal camps. "Those are forgeries," Vandermeer shouted. "Lies manufactured by Wade Braddock to protect his savage friends." "These are photographs of your own documents," Eliza said calmly. "From your own files. Notarized, dated, bearing your signature. The governor's people can verify their authenticity." She turned to Weatherby directly. "Sir, you came here expecting to find a territory torn by conflict between settlers and tribal populations. What you've actually found is a territory being torn apart by one man's greed. The food stores burned 3 days ago? That wasn't tribal raiders. That was arson designed to provoke retaliation, to create the violence Vandermeer needed to justify removal." "You can't prove that," Vandermeer snarled. "Actually, we can," a new voice called from the crowd. Henry Winters pushed forward, his face red, but his voice firm. "My son Charlie saw 2 men setting that fire. He recognized them, ranch hands who work for holding companies Vandermeer controls. He was too scared to say anything before, but I'm saying it now. Those weren't tribal raiders. They were Vandermeer's hired men." Another voice rose. "And my cattle that went missing? I found them 3 days later in a canyon on land Vandermeer owns. They hadn't been stolen. They'd been driven there and penned to make me think they were gone." More voices joined in, people who'd been too frightened or confused to speak up before, but who now saw the pattern clearly. Vandermeer's manipulation had been thorough, but it had also been widespread. Too many people involved, too many loose threads. Once Eliza pulled his first one, the whole fabric unraveled. The governor listened to it all, his expression growing darker. Finally, he held up his hand for silence. "Mr. Vandermeer," he said, "you will accompany the marshal to your office. We will examine these documents thoroughly. If they prove authentic, and I suspect they will, you'll face charges of conspiracy, fraud, and incitement to violence." "This is outrageous," Vandermeer said, but his voice lacked conviction. He saw his empire crumbling, saw the carefully constructed lies falling apart. "You can't possibly—" "I can, and I will," Weatherby said. "Marshal, escort Mr. Vandermeer to his office. Secure all documents related to land transactions and territorial business." As the marshal moved to comply, Vandermeer's facade finally shattered. He lunged toward the platform where Eliza stood, his face twisted with rage, his hand reaching for something in his coat. Wade moved before conscious thought, vaulting onto the platform and putting himself between Vandermeer and his daughter. Cal appeared from the crowd at the same instant, his gun drawn. Tom White blocked the steps. 3 men, 3 angles, all focused on protecting the young woman who'd just destroyed a corrupt man's carefully laid plans. Vandermeer stopped, seeing he was outmaneuvered. The marshal grabbed his arm roughly, and whatever weapon he'd been reaching for, gun or knife, Wade never found out, stayed concealed. "It's over, Cornelius," Wade said quietly. "You lost." Vandermeer looked at him with pure hatred. "You self-righteous bastard. You think you've saved them? You've just delayed the inevitable. This territory will be civilized whether you like it or not, and people like you and your savage friends will be swept aside by progress." "Progress doesn't require genocide," Wade interrupted. "It just requires honest men doing honest work, something you wouldn't recognize if it bit you." The marshal hauled Vandermeer away, the crowd parting to let them through. As they disappeared toward the office building, Wade turned to find Eliza pale and shaking, the adrenaline finally hitting her now that the danger had passed. "You were perfect," he said, pulling her into a fierce hug. "Terrifying and perfect." "I thought I was going to be sick," Eliza admitted. "When he came at me, But you weren't," Vivian said, climbing onto the platform to embrace them both. "You stood your ground. You spoke truth when others would have stayed silent. I'm so proud of you I can barely breathe." Governor Weatherby approached, his expression thoughtful. "Miss Braddock, That was either the bravest or the most foolish thing I've seen in 30 years of public service. I haven't decided which. Does it matter? Eliza asked. As long as it worked? Weatherby smiled slightly. I suppose not. Mr. Braddock, he turned to Wade, I owe you an apology. I came here expecting to authorize removal of the tribal population. Instead, I find a sophisticated conspiracy to steal their land. Your daughter's evidence is compelling. We'll investigate thoroughly, but I suspect Mr. Vandermeer will be facing federal charges that make territorial corruption look mild. What about the tribal camps? Wade asked. Their food stores were destroyed. They need provisions to survive winter. I'll authorize emergency supplies from territorial funds, Weatherby said, and I'll be recommending a full review of treaty compliance. If what I've heard today is accurate, we've been failing our obligations shamefully. That would be a start, Wade said carefully, though what they really need is to be treated like human beings instead of problems to be managed. Point taken, Weatherby said. I'll do better. We all will. The crowd was dispersing now, people talking excitedly, the tension that had gripped the territory for months finally breaking. Some looked relieved, others angry that they'd been manipulated, but the mood was shifting from fear to something like hope. Wade found Standing Bear and Running Deer watching from the edge of the square. The chief's expression was unreadable, but Running Deer smiled slightly when Wade approached. Your daughter has courage, she said. She spoke truth to power. That is no small thing. She learned it from watching brave people stand up for what's right, Wade said, including you. Will this governor keep his promises? Standing Bear asked. I don't know, Wade admitted, but at least now we have a chance to hold him accountable. That's more than we had yesterday. Then we will take that chance, Standing Bear said, and we will remember that Wade Braddock kept his word when others broke theirs. They clasped hands briefly, and Wade felt the weight of responsibility settle more firmly on his shoulders. The battle was won, but the war for justice would continue. It always did. The question was whether enough people would care enough to keep fighting. As darkness fell, Wade stood with Vivian and Eliza, watching the celebration continue around them. Music had started, people were dancing, and the territory felt lighter than it had in months. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new complications. But tonight, truth had won over lies, and courage had defeated corruption. That was enough. For now, it was enough. The celebration lasted well into the night, but Wade left early with Vivian and Eliza, exhaustion finally catching up to all of them. They rode home in companionable silence, the weight of the day settling over them like a blanket. When they reached the ranch, Cal was waiting in the yard, his face showing relief when he saw them safe. Mr. Braddock, he said. Miss Eliza, I heard what happened. The whole town's talking about how you stood up there, and he stopped, clearly struggling with words. That took real courage. Thank you, Cal, Eliza said quietly. She slid from her horse, stumbling slightly, and Cal caught her elbow to steady her. Their eyes met for a moment, and Wade saw something pass between them. Understanding, respect, maybe something deeper that neither was quite ready to name. You should get some rest, Cal said, releasing her arm quickly. It's been a long day. For all of us, Eliza said. She looked back at her parents. I'll see you in the morning. She walked toward the house, her shoulders finally sagging now that there was no audience to perform for. Wade watched her go, feeling pride and exhaustion war in his chest. That girl's gonna change this territory, Cal said softly. Already has, I suppose. She changed more than the territory today, Wade said. He looked at the young man. Cal, I need to ask you something, and I need an honest answer. Cal straightened, his expression wary. Sir? What are your intentions toward my daughter? The question hung in the air between them. Cal's face went carefully neutral, the way it did when he was thinking hard about how to say something important. Honorable ones, he said finally. But I also know I'm not the kind of man her mother wants for her. No family name, no money, no prospects beyond what I can earn with my own hands. He met Wade's eyes directly. I won't ask for something I don't deserve, but I also won't pretend I don't care about her. That would be dishonest. And you've always valued honesty. I have, Wade agreed. So let me be honest with you. Vivian's learning to see past surface things to what actually matters. It's taking time, but she's getting there. And Eliza's smart enough to know her own heart. If she chooses you, it won't be because you tricked her or because she doesn't know better. It'll be because she sees what I see. A man worth standing beside. Cal's throat worked. That's high praise, sir. It's earned praise, Wade corrected. But here's the thing, Cal. Being worthy and being ready are different matters. If you want a future with my daughter, you need to be able to provide for her. Not luxury, not society, but security. A home. A life she can build on. I'm working on it, Cal said. I've been saving my wages. Figure in another year I'll have enough to lease some land, maybe start my own small operation. Or you could partner with me, Wade interrupted. I need someone I can trust to help run this ranch. Someone who knows the land, knows the work, knows how to deal with people honestly. 20% ownership stake, increasing to 40 over 5 years. Enough to build a real future on. Cal stared at him. Mister Braddock, I can't. That's too generous. It's not generosity, Wade said. It's good business. I'm getting older, and I need someone who can carry this place forward when I can't. But more than that, I need to know my daughter has options. If she chooses you, I want her to be choosing a man who can stand as her equal, not someone she has to lift up. This gives you that foundation. What if she chooses Boston instead? Then you'll still have the partnership, Wade said, because you've earned it regardless of what happens with Eliza. But I don't think she's choosing Boston. I think she's figuring out that what she wants has been here all along. Cal extended his hand, and Wade shook it firmly. I won't let you down, sir. I know you won't, Wade said. Now get some sleep. Tomorrow we start dealing with the aftermath of tonight's chaos. Inside the house, Wade found Vivian sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea she wasn't drinking. She looked up when he entered, her face showing the same bone-deep exhaustion he felt. Is Cal all right? She asked. Better than all right, Wade said. He poured himself a drink and sat across from her. I offered him a partnership in the ranch. Vivian's eyebrows rose. That's significant. It is, but he's earned it, and more importantly, Eliza deserves to have real choices. Not between poverty and security, but between different versions of a good life. You're assuming she'll choose him. I'm assuming she'll choose herself, Wade corrected, whatever that looks like. Vivian was quiet for a moment, her fingers tracing the rim of her teacup. I talked to the governor's aide after you left. They're going to recommend significant reforms to how the territory handles tribal relations. Better oversight, enforcement of treaty obligations, prosecution of anyone who violates the agreements. It's not perfect, but it's better than what we had. That's something, Wade said. It's more than something. It's a start. Vivian looked at him. We did this together. You and me and Eliza. We actually changed things. For now, Wade said. There'll be other Vandermeers, other schemes, other fights. I know. But at least now I know I can stand and fight instead of running away. She paused. Wade, I want to talk about us. About what happens next. Wade's hand tightened on his glass. All right. I've been thinking a lot these past few days about why I really left. I told you it was because I couldn't stand the violence, the fear, the constant struggle. And that was part of it. But the real reason... She stopped, gathering courage. The real reason was I didn't believe I deserved you. Wade started to speak, but she held up her hand. Let me finish. You were everything I wasn't. Strong, certain, unafraid to stand for what was right even when it cost you. And I was just me, scared, shallow, more concerned with appearance than substance. I looked at you every day and felt like a fraud. Like you'd married someone you thought I was, and eventually you'd realize I wasn't that person at all. Vivian. So I left before you could leave me, she continued. Told myself it was about Eliza's future, about wanting better for her. But really, I was just protecting myself from the pain of watching you figure out I wasn't good enough. Wade set down his glass and moved around the table to kneel beside her chair. You want to know what I thought when you left? What? I thought I'd failed you. That I'd been so focused on saving the territory, on fighting every battle that came along, that I'd forgotten to save us, forgotten to fight for the one thing that actually mattered. He took her hands. You weren't the fraud, Vivian. I was. I was so busy being the man everyone needed that I forgot to be the man you needed. That's not true. It is true, Wade said. I let this place consume me. Let duty and principle and all my self-righteous certainty about right and wrong push out room for softness, for compromise, for the kind of flexibility that marriages need. I turned everything into a battle, including us. Vivian's eyes filled with tears. We're both idiots then. Spectacular idiots, Wade agreed. But maybe we've learned something these past few days. Maybe we've figured out how to be partners instead of just two people living separate lives under the same roof. I don't want to go back to Boston, Vivian said. I thought I did. Thought I needed the safety, the predictability, the world where I understood the rules, but I realized something today. The only place I've ever felt truly alive is here. Fighting beside you, standing for something that matters, being the person I always should have been. Then stay, Wade said simply. Stay and help me build something better than what we had before. Not the same marriage, not pretending the past 3 years didn't happen, but something new, something stronger. What if I fail again? What if I get scared and want to run? Then you run, Wade said. And I'll be here when you come back. I'll always be here, Vivian. That's the one thing I can promise you. I'm not going anywhere. She pulled him up and kissed him, desperate and fierce, and Wade felt years of loneliness and anger and hurt begin to crack and fall away. They weren't fixed, not completely. There would be more hard conversations, more painful honesty, more learning how to be together instead of just adjacent. But for the first time in years, Wade believed they had a chance. They held each other in the quiet kitchen while the night wind rattled the windows and the future waited just beyond the dawn. The next morning brought a steady stream of visitors to the ranch. Sheriff Ridley came first with news that the governor's investigators had found exactly what Eliza's photograph showed: a comprehensive conspiracy involving land fraud, bribery, and incitement to violence. Vandermeer was being held pending federal charges that would likely see him imprisoned for years. The town council's calling an emergency meeting, Ridley said. They want you there, Wade. Need someone they can trust to help reorganize things now that Vandermeer's influence is being excised. I'm not interested in politics, Wade said. It's not politics, it's cleanup. Making sure the corrupt officials Vandermeer placed don't just slide into his position. Ridley paused. The territory needs honest men in leadership. You've proven you're willing to stand for what's right, even when it costs you. That's rare. I'll think about it, Wade said, which was the most commitment he was willing to give. Standing Bear and Running Deer arrived mid-morning with news that the territorial government was already delivering emergency supplies to the camps. The food stores would be rebuilt, and the governor had promised a formal investigation into treaty compliance that would hopefully prevent future abuses. This is not full justice, Standing Bear said, but it is more than we have had in many years. Your family stood with us when others would not. We will not forget that. Neither will I forget your dignity through all this, Wade said. A lesser people would have burned this territory down in retaliation. You chose restraint even when it must have felt like swallowing poison. Restraint is not weakness, Running Deer said. It is choosing when to fight and when to wait for a better moment. Today was the better moment. They shared a meal, simple food but offered with genuine respect, and Wade felt the bonds of alliance solidify into something more permanent. This wouldn't solve everything. Prejudice and fear ran too deep for one dramatic revelation to erase, but it was a foundation, a starting point for building something better. After they left, Wade found Eliza in the barn with Cal. They were standing close but not touching, talking in low voices, and Wade almost turned away to give them privacy. But Eliza saw him and waved him over. "Father, I need to tell you something," she said. Her face was flushed but determined. "I've made my decision about Boston." Wade's heart clenched, but he kept his expression neutral. "All right." "I'm not going," Eliza said. "I'm staying here. Not because of Cal." She glanced at the young man. "Though he's certainly part of why I want to stay. But because this is where I belong. This hard, beautiful, complicated place where people fight for what matters instead of what's easy." "Your mother will have opinions about that," Wade said carefully. "Mother already knows," Eliza said. "I told her this morning. She said—" Eliza's eyes filled with tears. "She said she was proud of me. Said I was braver than she'd been at my age, and she wouldn't try to make me into something I'm not." Wade felt his throat tighten. That must have been hard for her to say. It was, but she said it anyway. Eliza straightened her shoulders. "I want to do something meaningful with my life, Father. I want to help people the way you help those families in the camps. Maybe work with the territorial government on tribal relations, or help settlers and indigenous people find ways to coexist. I don't know exactly what it looks like yet, but I know it's here in this territory, building something new. That's ambitious, Wade said. Also probably going to make you a lot of enemies. I learned from the best, Eliza said with a slight smile. You've been making enemies for years by standing for what's right. I figure I can do the same. What about Cal? Wade asked, looking at the young man who'd been standing silently through the conversation. Where does he fit into these plans? Cal cleared his throat. That's up to Miss Eliza, sir. I've made my feelings clear, but I won't pressure her into anything. She's got her own path to walk, and I respect that. What if I want you walking beside me? Eliza asked, turning to him. What if I choose both, meaningful work and you? Cal's face transformed, hope breaking through the careful neutrality he'd been maintaining. Then I'd say you're making me the luckiest man in the territory. I'd say you're both making smart choices, Wade said. But Cal, you need to understand something. Eliza's going to push boundaries, challenge powerful people, make waves that'll splash back on anyone standing close to her. You ready for that? Been standing close to you for 2 years, Mr. Braddock, Cal said. Figure I've got some practice with making powerful people uncomfortable. Wade laughed despite himself. Fair point. He looked at his daughter. You're sure about this? About all of it? More sure than I've been about anything, Eliza said. I know it won't be easy. I know there'll be setbacks and opposition and times I'll question everything, but I also know I can't live a safe, comfortable life knowing I could have done more. You taught me that. I taught you to be a pain in the ass, Wade said, but I'm proud of the pain in the ass you've become. Eliza hugged him hard, and Wade held his daughter close, feeling the bittersweet ache of watching a child become her own person. She was choosing a hard path, one that would test her in ways he couldn't protect her from. But she was also choosing it with open eyes and a brave heart, and that was all any parent could ask for. That evening, the Braddock family gathered for dinner, all 3 of them together for the first time in years. Vivian had cooked, which Wade noted with quiet surprise. She'd spent 3 years in Boston having servants handle such tasks, but tonight she'd returned to the kitchen like she'd never left. It's not fancy, she said as she set down plates of steak and potatoes, but it's honest food, and I made it with my own hands. Feels right somehow. It's perfect, Eliza said. They ate in comfortable silence for a while before Vivian spoke again. I've been thinking about what I want to do. Now that I'm staying, I can't just be a ranch wife again. I've changed too much for that. What are you thinking? Wade asked. Education, Vivian said. This territory needs a proper school, one that teaches both settler and tribal children together. Not separate, not unequal, but actually integrated. It'll be controversial as hell, but I think it's necessary. You're right that it'll be controversial, Wade said. There are people who'll fight you on that. Let them fight, Vivian said. I spent 3 years running from fights. I'm done with that. She looked at Eliza. Besides, if my daughter can stand up to corrupt politicians in front of the whole territory, I can certainly handle some angry parents who think their children are too good to learn alongside indigenous kids. We're going to be a family of troublemakers, Eliza said. Father fighting for justice, mother revolutionizing education, me working on territorial reform. Could be worse, Wade said. Could be sitting around being comfortable while the world goes to hell. To being uncomfortable, then, Vivian said, raising her glass. To fighting for what matters instead of what's easy. They toasted, and Wade felt something settle in his chest that had been unsettled for years. His family was whole again, not the same as before, not pretending the damage hadn't happened, but stronger for having broken and repaired themselves. The weeks that followed brought transformation to the entire territory. The council reorganized under new leadership, with Wade reluctantly accepting a position that let him influence policy without being consumed by politics. Vivian began planning her integrated school, finding surprising support from Running Deer and other tribal leaders who saw education as key to their children's futures. Eliza started working with the territorial government as an advisor on indigenous relations, her youth and fresh perspective proving valuable in negotiations that older, more entrenched officials couldn't navigate. Cal proved himself worthy of Wade's trust, managing the ranch with a combination of intelligence and integrity that impressed even the skeptics. When he formally asked Wade for permission to court Eliza, Wade gave his blessing without hesitation. Vivian took longer to come around, but even she couldn't deny that Cal treated their daughter with respect and genuine partnership rather than possessive ownership. The first real test of the territory's new direction came in December when a severe early winter storm hit. Food became scarce, travel dangerous, and the old divisions threatened to reassert themselves. But this time, people responded differently. Settlers shared supplies with tribal families. The tribal hunters shared their knowledge of surviving harsh conditions. The Morrison brothers coordinated distribution of emergency provisions without price gouging. It wasn't perfect. Old prejudices and fears still lurked beneath the surface, but it was better. And better was progress. On Christmas Eve, the Braddock Ranch hosted a gathering that would have been unthinkable 6 months earlier. Settlers and tribal families mixed freely, sharing food and stories, children playing together without the artificial divisions their parents had maintained. Standing Bear and Wade stood by the fire, watching the mingling with satisfaction. "Your wife's school will change things," Standing Bear said. "Our children learning your language, your history, your children learning ours. Eventually, the divisions will seem foolish." "That's the hope," Wade said. "Though there'll always be people who prefer division, it gives them someone to blame for their own failures." "Then we ensure such people do not hold power," Standing Bear said simply. "Your daughter is good at exposing corruption. We will support her in that work." "She'll need it," Wade said. Vandermeer wasn't the only corrupt man in this territory, just the most obvious. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the celebration, until Vivian appeared at Wade's elbow with mulled cider. "You should mingle," she said. "You're hosting, after all." "I'm observing," Wade corrected, making sure nobody starts a fight. "Nobody's fighting. They're actually enjoying themselves." Vivian smiled. "It's almost miraculous." "It's people being human instead of fearful," Wade said. "Not miraculous, just rare." Across the room, Eliza and Cal were talking with Running Deer and a group of young people from both communities. They were laughing about something, the sound carrying clearly through the warm house, and Wade felt profound gratitude for the chance to witness it. "Do you think it'll last?" Vivian asked quietly. "This peace we've built?" "I think it'll last as long as enough people are willing to fight for it," Wade said. "Which means it'll be fragile, constantly tested, requiring work every single day." "That doesn't sound very hopeful." "It's realistic," Wade said, "but realistic doesn't mean hopeless. We've proven change is possible. That truth can win over lies if someone's brave enough to speak it. That people can choose cooperation over conflict if given a real alternative." He pulled her close. "We've built a foundation. What gets built on that foundation is up to the next generation. Our daughter's generation." "Our daughter's generation," Wade agreed, "and I'm betting on them. Eliza and Cal and Running Deer and all the other young people who are too stubborn to accept that things have to stay the way they've always been. They're going to build something better than what we gave them." "You really believe that?" "I have to," Wade said. "Otherwise, all this fighting was for nothing." The celebration continued late into the night, and when the last guests finally left, Wade stood on his porch watching the stars wheel overhead. Vivian came to stand beside him, wrapped in a heavy coat, her breath misting in the cold air. "I never thought we'd get here," she said. "Back to this. To us." "Neither did I," Wade admitted. "There were days I thought we were broken beyond repair." "What changed?" Wade considered that. "We stopped trying to be who we thought we should be and started being who we actually are. Flawed, scared, stubborn, but willing to fight for what matters. Even when fighting means admitting we were wrong." "Especially then," Wade said. "That's the hardest fight of all, the one against your own pride, your own certainty that you know best." Vivian leaned against him. "I love you, Wade Braddock. I never stopped, even when I ran away, even when I convinced myself I hated you. Under all that fear and anger, I loved you." "I know," Wade said. "I felt the same way. Love and hurt all tangled together until I couldn't tell which was which anymore." "And now?" "Now it's just love," Wade said simply. "Hard-earned, battle-tested, stronger for having survived everything that tried to break it." They went inside together, closing the door on the cold night and the uncertain future. There would be more challenges, there always were. More corruption to fight. More prejudice to overcome. more moments when despair threatened to overwhelm hope. But they'd face it together, all three of them, Wade and Vivian and Eliza, standing for truth when lies were easier, for justice when injustice was profitable, for unity when division was convenient. The territory would test them. It would push and probe, looking for weakness, demanding compromise when none should be given. Some battles they'd win, some they'd lose. But they'd keep fighting because that's what people did when they actually cared about something beyond their own comfort. In the bedroom they'd once shared and would share again, Wade watched Vivian brush out her hair by lamplight and felt the weight of years settle into something like peace. Not perfect peace. They were too honest with each other now for comfortable illusions, but the kind of peace that came from knowing you'd stood for something that mattered. "Do you ever regret it?" Vivian asked, catching his eye in the mirror. "All the fights, the enemies, the constant struggle?" "Every day," Wade said honestly, "but I'd regret the alternative more. Staying silent, accepting injustice, letting fear rule me." He paused. "We could have had an easier life if we'd compromised more, accepted things as they were." "We also would have hated ourselves," Vivian said, "and taught our daughter that comfort matters more than conviction." "There's that," Wade agreed. Vivian set down her brush and turned to face him. "I'm glad I came back. Glad I stopped running. Glad I finally became the person I should have been all along." "You were always that person," Wade said. "Just took you a while to remember." She crossed to him, and they stood together in the lamplight, two people who'd broken and healed and broken again, now choosing to build something stronger than what they'd started with. The future was unwritten, uncertain, full of challenges they couldn't predict, but they'd face it together, and that made all the difference. Outside, the winter wind sang through the valley, carrying the promise of hard months ahead. But inside the Braddock ranch, warmth and light held against the darkness, a small beacon of hope in a territory learning slowly to be better than it had been. It wasn't the ending anyone had expected. There was no dramatic victory, no final defeat of all enemies, no perfect resolution that tied everything into a neat bow. Instead, there was just life. Messy, complicated, beautiful life, lived by people who refused to accept that things couldn't change. Wade Braddock lay down beside his wife that night and felt, for the first time in years, that he could rest. Not because the battles were over, they never were, but because he finally had true partners in fighting them. Vivian, fierce and unafraid now that she'd stopped lying to herself. Eliza, brave and determined to build a better world than the one she'd inherited. Cal, honest and capable, proving every day that worth had nothing to do with birth. Together, they would hold this territory together. Together, they would stand against corruption and greed and the thousand small cruelties that people inflicted on each other when fear ruled them. Together, they would prove that truth could still matter, that justice was worth fighting for, that love, real, earned, tested love, was stronger than the forces that tried to tear it apart. And if that wasn't a happy ending, Wade thought, as sleep finally claimed him, then it was at least an honest one, which, in the end, was all he'd ever really wanted. The story of the Braddock family and their fight for justice in a corrupt frontier territory was just beginning. But the foundation was laid, solid and true, built on courage and sacrifice and the kind of love that refused to quit, even when quitting would be easier. That foundation would hold. Wade was sure of it, not because he had faith in grand ideals or inevitable progress, but because he had faith in specific people, his wife, his daughter, his future son-in-law, and all the other stubborn, brave souls who chose truth over comfort. The territory would be better for their fighting. Not perfect, never perfect, but better. And better was enough. Better was everything. Outside, the stars wheeled overhead, indifferent to human struggles, but somehow comforting in their constancy. The wind whispered through the pines, carrying stories of all who'd fought and loved and lost in this hard country. And inside the Braddock Ranch, 3 souls slept the sleep of the righteous, not because they were without flaw, but because they'd stood for something that mattered when standing was hard. That, in the end, was what made heroes. Not perfection, but courage. Not winning every battle, but refusing to stop fighting. Not being unafraid, but being brave enough to act despite the fear. The Braddocks had learned that lesson the hard way. Now they would teach it to a territory that desperately needed to learn that change was possible, that justice could prevail, and that sometimes the hardest battles were the ones worth fighting most fiercely. Their story would continue, through winters and springs, through setbacks and victories, through all the ordinary days that made up extraordinary lives. But this chapter had ended well, with a family restored, a territory saved, and hope planted like seeds in rocky soil, ready to grow into something beautiful and strong. And that was enough. That was everything.